Right, I'm going to make a start because it's time. My name's Farrell and I'm from Safespaces. I'm the product advisor, so I work with families, healthcare professionals, education professionals to try and find outcomes which enable people to use our products to give them a safer environment. So most of the people that we work with have complex additional needs. So the objective of today's seminar is to give you kind of like an overview, and in particular I'm concentrating on the Safespace multi-purpose room. We do high-sided beds, but we're just focusing on the Safespace multi-purpose room, and that's just across the way there on stand 69. If you want to follow me across after the tour, you can experience the product yourself. So the products are designed to support behaviour self-management, help with sensory processing, sleep hygiene, that sort of thing. So can I just ask for a show of hands, is there any healthcare professionals here today? I know Jill. Are there any education-based professionals? And are there any families? Yeah. I need to change the slides, don't I? Let's have a look. It's not going to do that. So the Safespaces, we started in the year 2000. We're a family-run business and we're based in Yorkshire. We design, develop, manufacture and install all our products ourselves. We produce products which are designed for adults and children, and we distribute those internationally now. As I said, most of our individuals have complex needs, additional needs and sensory processing disorders. So our products are designed for use in schools, hospitals, care homes, respite centres, in people's homes as bedrooms, and a policy of best practice. We're members of the British Healthcare Trades Association, so we follow their ethical policy, so if a product's not suitable we won't sell it to you. And we're also now working to MDR guidelines, which means that all of our products are grade 1 medical devices. That's changed the way that some people manufacture. There's been quite a few hurdles to overcome with that, but that just gives people the reassurance that our products are specified for medical use. So I'm going to just go on to a short film, which I hope is going to play. It might not, of course. Stay with me because I'm not technically minded and I'm just hoping that I can play the film. But don't worry if not, we'll just carry on. We'll just do without that. It's not playing. So the Safespace itself is, if you haven't seen one before, it is a soft-sided room that sits inside a room to keep somebody safe from hard surfaces. We've got one with us today so that you can go and try it. So it's customised according to the needs, mobility and behaviours of the person using it. I suppose it's somebody's displaying behaviour where they might be unsafe in an ordinary room from the hard surfaces, then that can be constructed inside the room. So when we design them to meet the individual's needs and also the space it's going into. So they can be different sizes. The smallest size we make is a single bed size, and we go up to kind of like a 2 metre by 2 metre size. We don't generally suggest that they go larger than that, and that's mainly because they then become a space that's self-stimulating rather than calming in our experience. In a home situation then, the safe space is used as a bedroom within the room. A mattress can go into that space and someone can use the space to be in. The advantage is it can be a low stimulation space where the lights are low, there's a blind on the window, and someone has less to think about because there's less in that space to stimulate their brain. It can also, at the flick of a switch, have lighting, projections, fibre optics, and become a stimulating space for those that need that stimulation to help them calm. So, from a point of view of use, very quickly it can be moved from high stimulation to low stimulation, more light, less light, and you can tailor make it according to the features that you've got. We also find that it's quite good in promoting independence and privacy. For some individuals that are very closely looked after all the time, that can sometimes be quite nice, because if they're very closely looked after all the time, it's quite nice to have a space where you can just be on your own. And the carers can observe from a distance, and that individual can have their own time. In schools, and we do put them into a lot of schools, we're talking here about the safe space multi-purpose room still. In a school environment, it can be used in different ways. Very often a school will approach us and they'll put a safe space in. They might have 1 or 2 pupils in mind where that individual's going into crisis multiple times a day, and they need somewhere not only for the individual to be kept safe instead of maybe being held or restrained to keep themselves safe. Can you still hear me okay? I'll touch the microphone now. But also from their staff point of view, very often individuals need to be able to talk to someone to help them calm without actually physically holding them. So some schools will initially get a safe space with crisis management high on their list. But if the safe space is used appropriately and well, the idea is that someone will eventually learn to go to the safe space and use the safe space and start to understand that they can go to the safe space to calm themselves. You'll see, if the films aren't playing, I'll talk to you about a particular school where they started with one safe space for one particular individual who was being held multiple times a day to keep themselves safe. And through the use of the safe space, I'm not saying this happened overnight, over maybe a number of weeks and months, that individual got so that they were held never. Because they started to learn that they could go to the safe space to be safe. And as they started to realise the changes in their own body, they were realising that at an earlier stage. So eventually, they didn't need to use the safe space. That's a really good result. That particular school now has 6 safe spaces in their autism section. They're in Bury in Manchester, and they use the safe space as a pre-learning tool. So pupils go, they can be in that space ready to go to class to learn. We do a lot of support with schools. We offer them a webinar. We talk about how the safe space should be used appropriately and well, and that's important. In a school situation, very often the safe space is used instead of room padding, which can be quite impractical. And with the safe space, you can drop it down and you can move it from one location to another. What advantage that gives you is that it can actually follow a pupil through the school and maybe to another school. So they have that facility ready. Is the sound going in and out, or is it okay? Safe space should never be used as an alternative to inadequate supervision, as an unplanned or informal kind of restrictive practice, and it should always be monitored. And in particular, when we work with schools, one of the things that is really, really beneficial is that if the use of the Safespace is mapped, and this goes for families that use it as well. My films aren't playing, but the rest is working. Is that if the Safespace is mapped, what's really helpful is they can start, this is some families as well that we work with, they come to us and sometimes we help them with this. If you map its use over a period of time, you can start to see a pattern. So there might be a particular pupil, say in this case, who's going to the Safespace every Tuesday and they're in a heightened state. And the staff may be initially not sure why they're doing that, but in mapping its use, they might be able to start to work out what that individual's trigger. Maybe it's a sensory overload, and it might be something as simple as it's lunchtime, it's very noisy, the sound level's escalated, and that person can't cope because their sensory processing is fluctuating through the day, but they can retreat to the safe space. But in mapping its use, you can start to work out what those triggers might be for people. So it's used a lot in schools in that way. Sorry, I'm not reviewing the slides. So in terms of supporting behaviour self-management, we all know that challenging behaviours can be very, very challenging, not just for the person displaying them, but obviously for family, for siblings, and then within, depending on the setting, again, in school situations or care situations. And behaviour can be seen as challenging when it's of an intensity or happens so regularly that it's starting to disrupt normal life. Or maybe physical safety for other people. And it can often lead to responses which are restrictive, aversive, and maybe in some cases result in exclusion in a school situation. So we see challenging behaviours as somebody displaying behaviour that's disruptive. Maybe they're eating inedible objects, slight behaviour, climbing, absconding, repetitive behaviour, we see a lot of that, spitting, urinating, smearing, that can all be seen as challenging behaviour. What I guess needs to be looked at is why that challenging behaviour is happening. Somebody's trying to, particularly if they're not verbal, they're trying to communicate that something is wrong, they're trying to organise themselves, they're trying to have an effect, they're trying to change the situation, cope with their sensory processing. They might actually be trying to communicate distress. So challenging behaviour, again, strategies need to be put in place to help somebody with that challenging behaviour and try to cope with that person's communication. So how can a safe space help with challenging behaviours? Well, somebody can use the safe space as a retreat, escape, something that may be a trigger. You might not know what it is. When they go to the safe space, if you give it a try, you'll realise that it has, it can be, again, a retreat that gives them a dark space. It can be distracting with lights. Dependent on how you dress the safe space inside, you can tailor different people's needs. That individual then can start to understand why they might be behaving in that way. If they've got somewhere they can go to start to learn to cope with their why they've reacted in such a way. What's making them anxious? We worked with a young boy in school actually who had been given access to the safe space. He was non-verbal and he was going into crisis quite a lot of time, and a lot of staff were spending quite a lot of time trying to cope with that situation. And of course other children in that class suffered. In using the safe space, they worked out that they needed to give them a non-verbal way of communication. So we made them a swatch, a big swatch, the same colour as the Safespace they had. And the staff, when he started to become anxious, they would show him the swatch, and then they would enable him to go to use the Safespace. Over a period of quite a long time, I think it might have been longer than 3 months actually, they worked out that they needed to give him the swatch, and he would eventually raise the swatch in class, and then he'd be taken to the Safespace. Then he learned to raise the swatch and take himself to the Safespace. And the really, really nice end of this story is that that young lad, which was really, really nice, eventually he managed to go to a shopping centre with his mum, which he'd never done before. If she had the swatch in her bag, and he managed to go shopping with his mum, and if he became anxious, he just needed to look at the swatch to imagine the Safespace to start to calm. So that, it was a massive, massive leap for him to go, not being able to control his anxiety, whatever the trigger was, to actually just looking at the Safespace, to imagine going there to be able to calm himself. So that is a really good use of the product. In a crisis situation, I suppose, a lot of the time we work with schools, we coach them through this process. What's really important is that they do have somewhere safe, and that staff can be outside of the space and they can be communicating. The individual can be acting out their behaviours. The member of staff is also safe, and that is important for a lot of schools to obviously enable their staff to do their job, but for them to be safe as well. And what I wanted to just mention, I was just looking at my notes, what's quite important is those relationships. You are protecting the relationships from having to get that close, restraint maybe things, where you are starting to damage relationships that cannot be repaired really after that incident has maybe happened and escalated to a point that's unsafe. You've then left with staff that have got to try and repair that relationship, and that's very difficult. So it's about maintaining relationships as well. Someone being able to be observed from a distance in a safe environment. And that's particularly important during teenage years as well, that someone has a private space to go during that time. We've started conducting a survey at Safespaces because we've always got stories from people, but we hadn't actually had customers that use our product. So we do a survey for people that are using the Safespace. For those that have just joined us, we're focusing on the Safespace multi-purpose room this morning. So we asked people that had had the Safespace about improvement in challenging behaviours. One of the questions was, does the Safespace help with that? And 54% of people with Safespaces said yes, it helped in support of challenging behaviours. So moving on to sensory processing disorders, according to the National Autistic Society Schools report, which was a 2021 report, this is quite interesting. It's estimated that between 5 and 16.5% of the general population have symptoms associated with sensory processing difficulties. And those estimates are higher for people with autism or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD. I thought that was quite interesting actually. So how can a Safespace help with that? Well, a Safespace is, again, it's a retreat space. It's ideal for delivering elements of a sensory diet. You can, as I said before, you can change the space very quickly. I think it's quite important to remember that individuals that might have sensory processing disorder, that sensory processing might actually fluctuate throughout the day. And with a lot of the individuals we work with, we tend to find that. So in the morning, their auditory processing might be fine. But as they get tired during the day, by the end of the day, they just might not be able to cope with sound. But again, the Safespace can help with that because again, if the use is mapped and used as part of a plan approach, then you can start to map when people use it on what might the triggers be, particularly in terms of sensory processing. Most sensory equipment can be used in the Safespace, so that's projections, fibre optics, soft play shapes. It can be used for quite intimate therapeutic sessions, massage, that sort of thing. Very often the individuals that we provide products for do find it difficult to communicate. So what the Safespace does give you a chance to do is for them, when they're communicating that they need the Safespace, again, if it's mapped, you can start to obviously communicate on that kind of level. For those with vestibular difficulties, so with balance difficulties, the Safespace is quite interesting because very often those individuals are a bit unsure about exploring their space for fear of falling or balance. The Safespace floor is a moving, flexing foam floor. And initially when they go in, they're a bit thrown by that because it does move. But as they get used to it, what we realise is they really like it because they know that if they fall, they're not going to hurt themselves. So they feel freer to explore the space. And they're looking to get that feedback from the walls of a room. Again, the Safespace is ideal. The walls are slightly tensioned, so it gives you a skin-on-skin effect. So when they push against the sides, they get feedback, but they're not going to hurt themselves. And that's for those with quite robust, shall we say, behaviours, who are maybe going to punch, kick, want that deep pressure. And if you want to give it a try, what I tend to suggest is we want a full body proprioceptive feedback. We get a lot of feedback from families and they say, our child gets underneath the mattress. So they get between the floor, which is a flexing floor, and they put the mattress on top and they get a whole body pressure. You can also do that by pushing yourself against the side of the Safespace and putting a cushion up against yourself. And again, we show people how they can do that. So they're getting that feedback, but it's safe. They're not against a hard surface. So again, on this new survey that we're doing, which was May 2022, this May, and we asked people that use the Safespace about improvement in sensory issues, we got a 49% said yes, it helps with sensory issues. Sleep, the big one. When we get involved with families very often, unfortunately, they've normally tried everything else, and when they come to Safespaces, normally we get them and they're hanging on by their fingertips as a family because of sleep deprivation very often. It's a dreadful, dreadful thing. And we do have families that have actually said to us, we have not slept properly for 10 years, but we've recently been able to sleep. Poor sleep can result in poor mood, irritability, impaired concentration. It's important for growth, and they've recently said that some stages of sleep, some stages of the sleep cycle actually release growth hormones. So in children, sleep is very important. Poor sleep has recently been attributed to lowering of the immune system as well. So how much sleep do we need? So, recommendations from the sleep charity are that people need more sleep than we think. So for 1 to 2 year olds, they're saying 11 to 14 hours, including naps. And that reduces very slowly until a person reaches 13, and between 13 and 18 years old, teenagers are recommended 8 to 10 hours sleep. Now, according to Scope, which is the disability equality charity, this is quite dreadful. 3 out of 10 children have sleep problems. But that figure goes up to 8 out of 10 for children with intellectual disability. I was absolutely shocked by that. There's somebody nodding there, you obviously know that, but that was shocking. So why do we have sleep issues? Well, the National Charity for Children with Brain Conditions, which is Cerebra, I don't know if anyone here knows about Cerebra, they put a paper out called Sleep, A Guide for Parents. And they're saying that issues with sleep can be, for a number of reasons, physical health, so that's, genetic syndromes, incontinence, pain, maybe seizures, psychiatric vulnerabilities, so that's fear of the dark, separation anxiety, sometimes the effects of medications, contraindications with medications, differences in internal body clock, and we know that affects a lot of the users of our products. So that's, the release of sleep hormone is not at the right time. Differences in sensory processing, distractions, distress around bedtime. Interestingly, parental responses is given as one of the things in that report. So that's learned responses, kind of mutual reinforcement about sleep hygiene, and also hospitalisation, regular hospitalisation, which is, we get a lot of our users that have that, and that again, that disrupts sleep. So how does a Safespace help with sleep? Well, as I said, it can be a very low stimulation environment. If you want to give it a try while you're here, because of the thickness of the fabric, the sound is slightly dampened when you go inside. And that's an interesting one, because a lot of our users will go inside and they'll lay down and they go straight to sleep. And it's because the sound is just, it's not a lot, but it's just enough for people to start to de-escalate or to start to calm down. Just enough. And also in terms of sleep, it gives a lot of families a safe place for someone to be if they continue to wake through the night. A lot of our users awake during the night for long periods of time. And it's not just about them, it's about other family members. So other siblings, next door neighbours, parents who are trying to do the care. Actually, they can be awake, they can be doing their thing, but the rest of the family can still sleep, which is a big one really. And they can then be ready to care the next morning. We've worked with the Emelina Sleep Clinic, which is linked to Great Ormond Street, and some of the consultants there have developed a sleep app. If you want to know more about that, just come and see us on the stand, because we're recommending that to a lot of families. It's a brilliant app. We can send you information if you give us your information. It's on a phone, and what it enables families to do is to make a note of when somebody's napping or sleeping, and that information's on their phone. It stays on their phone. And then they need to share that with healthcare professionals. They've got it. They don't have to keep it all the time. They can just decide, this week, I'm going to record Johnny's sleep, and when he's asleep and when he's awake, and that information's theirs, and then they can share it with whoever they want to share it with. And it's quite a useful one. I can't remember what it's called, sorry, I was going to tell you, but I can't remember what it's called at the moment. So, we asked on our customer survey, we asked people that use the Safespace whether it's helpful with improved sleep, and we got a 66% of users said it helps with sleep. This is where we put the Millwood school film in. I'm not sure if that's going to play. I didn't before. Before I go on to funding, I just want to briefly talk about Millwood School. So the lady there that's a behaviour specialist is called Jill Tierney, and she's the lady that got one safe space for one particular individual who staff were having to help with meltdowns that went on for several hours, several times a day. They got the safe space, and in monitoring his use and helping him, he went from being held multiple times a day to never. They then looked at how they used the safe space and decided that they would put a safe space adjacent to each of their classrooms, their autism classrooms, where the focus was children with autism. And they have 6. So the children go into the safe space if they want to, ready to come to class to learn. She's a great advocate for our products, but she's quite an interesting person. If you want to watch that film, it's on our website, and it's Millwood School. They're based in Bury. They're a special educational needs school. But she's quite an interesting person. If anybody professionally wanted to link with her, she's quite happy for people to make contact with her. But I can't show the film, unfortunately, so I'm going to move on to funding. We get asked about funding a lot. 90% of our products are funded. So that's social service grants, home adaptation, which is facilities grants, community equipment grants, CCG, NHS funding, and also charity funding. We do have a lot of fact sheets. We have information that we send out to healthcare professionals, education professionals, and to families on funding, because, as I said, most of our products are funded using public money. So people have got to make a case for the funding, but as I said, most of our products are funded that way. Our process, we do a fact find, so whether it's a family, generally it's a healthcare professional or education professionals, they get into contact with us. We do an initial fact find because we need to work out whether our products are suitable. We then have a product assessment call. At the moment, that's all happening virtually, and we have a video call, and we look at someone's mobility, their behaviours, and their diagnosis to a lesser degree, and their sleep. Because we tend to find that you can have the same diagnosis for 10 different people and they're all totally different. So we tend to try and put the diagnosis to one side and look at mobility, behaviours, and sleep is the big one. And we try and work out from that whether our product's appropriate, and then we work with the healthcare professional, with the parents or the carers and ourselves to come up with a suitable product. As I said at the start, if a product's not suitable, we have an ethical sales policy, so we would recommend that we haven't got anything that might help. We then provide you a quote. Jill has worked with this before. That quote can be to purchase or to rent. And we also we deliver and install our products. We've got, the other thing that's new actually is we've got a resource hub. So when you purchase the product from us, you get the chance to go onto our resource hub, which tells you about maintaining the product, looking after the product. We do webinars with information on to try and support you with training. And you might not know, but we do product cleaning. We do moving products if the family move home. And we also store products. So if you're a healthcare professional and the family no longer need the product, it can come and be stored until such time as you can repurpose it to another family. So our presentations are CPD accredited. We honestly do try and give you a wraparound service. We try not to give you a product. We try and make sure it's a holistic approach. I wanted to say as well, what's quite important from Safespace's point of view is that from an ethos point of view, our products are designed to give the least restrictive option possible, so that someone can be themselves and act out their behaviours safely rather than being restrained from hurting themselves. Let's just see. There's something I've missed. Sorry, I forgot to put the slide on because it's a bit out of kilter because I haven't had the films. So, yeah, assessment, product design selection, funding options, production. So, and again, we make everything. Our lead time is 4 to 6 weeks. At the moment, it's 6 to 8 weeks because it's holiday time. But again, we manufacture everything on site and we liaise with families to say, right, it's now in production. It's looking like this week. Here's a delivery date. We work with families, again, the healthcare professional to ensure that everybody knows what's happening and it's installed by our technicians. We've got 2 sets of technicians that cover the country. And these are so we've got several webinars. Again, reducing restrictive practices is an interesting one. And the one that I've delivered today is the one that's at the bottom, which is about challenging behaviours, sensory processing and sleep, and how hopefully we can use the Safespace to help with all of those 3 things. Ta-da! That's the end. Thank you very much for sitting in on our talk. Sorry we didn't have the forms because they're a big part of what we do, because it's not me talking, it's about other people using the products, which I think is always really helpful. But we're over on the stand. Come and have a chat to us if you want to. Thanks for listening very much.